On today's episode, we are going to be making a faux Bolognese. Yes, I thought I was pretty clever when I came up with that. It is going to be a meatless Bolognese sauce. And my goal here is to basically have it so that I'm not missing meat in my meat sauce. So basically, I am doing meatless January, but I'm hoping that this will continue as the recipes develop and come together. I will just continue to not eat meat for a couple of months. Just a personal goal of mine. You can easily use this recipe with ground beef, veal, pork, whatever you want to do for your bolognese. Please substitute the ground beef portion. One of my best friends, Karen, and my sister, Lindsay, both are pescatarian and borderline vegetarian vegan, so I decided to hop into that train just for health reasons and just because I'm curious to see how I will feel without meat. So it's just for a month. So the next couple of recipes will be meatless, but I will give you substitutions so that way you can still enjoy these dishes with meat. So without further ado, we're going to get into making the sauce portion as well as the ground beef portion. There's two separate little recipes here. So like I said, feel free to swap out the bolognese with ground beef instead of using what I'm using today. So I'm going to pull in a little closer and you guys are going to take a look at the food processor and what I'm adding into that, and I will list the recipe in the description box below so that you can have it at home. And the exact amounts will be on my Patreon. So for the ground beef portion of this is my first time ever doing anything meatless or meat substitute without using ground beef substitute. I kind of want to replicate ground beef in a way that is doable for everyone at home. So you don't have to go out and buy, there's Impossible Meat, there's Beyond Burgers, all that kind of stuff. This will be a homemade version of this. And two people that inspire me, two chefs that inspired me to do this is the Edgy Veg on YouTube and then Tabitha Brown on YouTube. They're both incredible women. Both have amazing recipes, and yeah, they're really inspirational. I really love watching their videos, and it really inspires me to want to try to make a meatless meal. So without further ado, I'm going to pull you in closer, and we're going to take a look at how I'm going to start making the ground beef. So for the ground beef, the ingredients that I kind of figured out that I think would go best with this dish and taste most beef-like, or at least have the same kind of vibe. And from recipe searching and things like that, I kind of adapted this. So this is the first time making this, so we'll see what comes out. So in this bowl, I have about 1.5 large portobello mushrooms, the gills removed and small diced. I have some walnuts and some pecans. Both are raw and unsalted. And then I also have about 4 to 5 white button mushrooms. This dish is probably going to make enough meat sauce for probably like 2 to 4 people. So in the food processor, I'm putting all of this. I'm also going to be putting in half of this spice mixture in here. This is basically like an Italian seasoning that I made myself. I don't love a store-bought Italian seasoning because there tends to be rosemary in there, and I don't love rosemary in my sauce, if that makes sense. So in here I have crushed red pepper flakes, dried thyme, dried oregano, dried basil, salt, pepper, onion powder, and garlic powder. And I'm going to use half of this for the ground beef. And these are all seasonings that I would typically use anyways in my pasta sauce, bolognese, that kind of thing. I'm also adding, I think this might be a cool little secret ingredient, is red wine. This will cook off when we cook it. So that's probably about 2 tablespoons of red wine. And then this cup I have maybe a teaspoon of soy sauce. You could also use liquid coconut aminos. I also have a teaspoon or a teaspoon and a half of Worcestershire sauce. Again, they make vegan versions of this that you could substitute. And then also, what else did I put in there? A little bit of olive oil I'm going to add in this as well. And so for the olive oil, I'm only going to add about a tablespoon, and that's just kind of for the fattiness that ground beef has. All right, so I'm going to turn this on, and the consistency we're looking for is really just ground beef consistency, really. All right, so we'll get you in there. If it would start, then it would be really good. Why is it when I put the camera on that I have a hard time starting this? Okay, anyways, I'm going to pulse this because I don't want it to be too pureed. And honestly, we'll check that. That might be, honestly, that looks great. So I'll show you inside here. So there you go. That kind of shows you kind of the texture. I didn't want to go too far with this, and I'm okay with having a couple of big pieces of mushrooms. That's fine. That's all just going to flavor your sauce. It smells great. So we're going to cook this on the stove for about 5 to 10 minutes by itself in a little bit of olive oil, and I'll show you what that looks like. So I have my pan preheating on medium high. I'm going to add about a tablespoon of olive oil to the pan. You can use any neutral flavored oil if you want. I just like olive oil when I'm making sauce. And basically I'm going to cook my ground beef first, just to kind of get a vibe for how the texture is, and then taste it and season it if I have to, and I will tell you if I add more seasoning. And then in a separate pot, I will start the sauce portion. Just take your ground beef and pour it right in there. This smells so good. I really hope that this works. You know, like I said, this is something that's new for me in terms of being a chef. A lot of times in restaurants, people will come in and ask for vegan or vegetarian dishes, and we use what we have in the restaurant. But I think this is going to be exciting. I mean, I've watched so many videos on people making vegan, vegetarian options. And honestly, I think I was just intimidated. I just think it was something that was foreign to me. So we're gonna let this cook for about 5 minutes. You're really just cooking the mushrooms. You could also do a version of this with just nuts and make it a raw bolognese or a raw ground beef, which I've seen, which is basically just with nuts and seasonings. Okay, so we're gonna let this saute, and then I'll show you how to start the sauce. All right, so I have the ground beef browning, sauteing in a pan. I'm excited about this. So I'm also gonna move on to the sauce portion. We'll be adding our beef to our sauce. And so I'm going to start the sauce with mirepoix, which is literally carrots, celery, and onions. That's all it is. I did one small stalk of celery, one small carrot, and then one small onion. There's a little less celery. I don't love celery. It's one little unknown fact, I suppose. I don't love celery, but I do think it serves its purpose, and it is essential in mirepoix and a lot of sauces and soups and yada yada yada. So that. 3 cloves of, I like my garlic sliced, you can mince it. The other half of our spice mixture, and then a teaspoon of sugar. My mom always put white sugar at the end of her sauce or just before it was finished. It just helps cut the acidity sometimes that I feel like canned tomatoes or tomatoes in general can have. It's going to have a can of crushed tomatoes and a small can of tomato paste. And then I'm going to finish mine off at the end with some calabrian and chili pepper paste. This is from Trader Joe's. I went there today, and it's insane how long the lines are there, but they have great stuff there. So I'm going to push you in closer, and we're going to see the sauce being made and check out on the ground beef. So I have my little pot preheated on medium heat. I'm going to add another tablespoon of olive oil. I guess there's a lot of olive oil in this recipe. In the pot, I'm going to put the onions. Turn it down a little bit. I lost control there with the heat. The carrot. If your nanny has this ancient recipe for a bolognese and you're like, Nick, what are you doing? Please use it. By all means, maybe just try the ground beef portion of it. You don't have to follow my sauce recipe. I just am making it. And you can kind of do your own thing if you want to. If you have your favorite sauce recipe that you already know and love, please, by all means, do that. This is just something I came up with. I tend to only start my bolognese with mirepoix. I don't necessarily start my red sauce always with mirepoix. I tend to start my red sauce with onions and garlic, but I think for this, building and layering flavor like we talked about in previous episodes, I think the mirepoix is going to add to this because it is meatless. So that will saute for about 5 minutes on medium heat until the onions start to get translucent and the carrots start to cook down. So let's check in our ground beef mixture. It looks really good. It smells good. The reason I chose portobellos is because I always feel like portobello mushrooms have always had a meatier texture to me. And that's also where the nuts come in. Those are going to give you a meatier texture as well. I don't know, it smells really good, guys. I'm really hopeful for this, so we'll see. So I'll saute this maybe for a couple more minutes. I don't want to go too crazy, but I want to cook off that wine, and I want to make sure the mushrooms are cooked. And you'll see, once the liquid's all gone from the pan, that means your mushrooms are most likely already cooked. Mushrooms carry a lot of water in them, so just make sure you cook it long enough so that way you don't have watery sauce. No one wants that. Okay, our mirepoix is going. We'll check back in a few minutes. Can I just say that while this is cooking, the smell of the mushrooms with the nuts caramelizing and getting some color the smell is unreal. And remember, we have that red wine and Worcestershire and those like richer flavors that are really often paired with ground beef. So it's really, I mean, you tell me, it looks good, but I think it's gonna be awesome. So this looks like, so you can see the pan at the bottom, it's starting to stick a little bit. So we're gonna turn this off because it's pretty much done at this point. And that also was like half the cooking time of real beef. So look at that. It's probably a quicker cooking time than ground beef is anyways, or whatever you choose to put in your bolognese or your sauce. Again, this isn't like gonna replace your Nana's sauce. Don't come for me, okay? This is just a nice alternative if you did want to try something different. All right, I'm gonna turn this down a little bit. I did add in our garlic and then the other remaining half of the spice mixture. And this is gonna go for a couple more minutes. And then I'm gonna add in our ground beef mixture into here, and then we'll add in our tomato product, okay? Before I add in the ground beef, I'm gonna add in the tomato paste. I feel like I might not need the whole can for this, so I'm gonna leave about a quarter of it left. I just don't think I'm gonna need that much. And the reason we're putting the tomato paste in now is because it helps almost cook off that tinny, kind of canny flavor you get sometimes with canned products. We're gonna turn this down to low now and just kind of let that tomato paste caramelize and cook off a little bit. And that's just a little trick that kind of helps when you're making sauce with canned tomatoes. If you love wine, you can also add half a cup of red wine in there right now. Let it cook off. That would be stunning. You don't have to. All right, so that's good. I'll leave that on low. All right, I'm gonna add in my ground beef now. I mean, visually, you could fool people. Taste test, we'll see. All right, so put this aside. I'll wash that later. I'm gonna stir in the ground beef, and then we're gonna add in our crushed tomatoes. If you really wanted to fool people, you could probably make it a little bit chunkier than I did. It all depends on how chunky you like your meat sauce or your bolognese or whatever you may be making. All right, so I'm gonna add in the crushed tomatoes. If you have tomato sauce at home, throw tomato sauce in there. I am gonna throw a little bit of water. My mother taught me this. I always do it. I rinse out my can with water to get all the extra tomato sauce out of the can. I don't know if that's just my family thing, but I've always done that. Because really you're wasting it if you're not, you know? All right, so this is on low, and you can't tell me that does not look like a meat sauce. This would be perfect served over, you could do spaghetti, you could do zoodles, you could make this into a lasagna. I mean, this sauce can be used so many different ways. And you know, that ground beef recipe could be spiced with chili powder, cumin, coriander, salt, pepper, chili powder, cayenne, and you can put that into chili. It doesn't have to necessarily just be for a bolognese. You just change the spices out. So you can kind of basically use that base recipe a few different ways. All right, so this looks amazing. So I'm gonna let this simmer on low for about 10-15 minutes to finish cooking the vegetables. As you can see, it's thick, it looks rich, has a nice body to it. It'll cling to pasta perfectly, and I'm excited to try it. So before we finish up the sauce, I do want to add my little secret ingredient of sugar. Omit this if you are, you don't want the extra sugar, but I think it definitely helps cut the acidity of tomatoes. Just a little bit. Just kind of balances it all out. All right. So that was it. I mean, the sauce is super simple. You saw how long it took me to put it in the food processor. Granted, I had all my mise en place done, so that's basically getting everything in order and everything in place before you start cooking. That took me maybe a half an hour. If you're a little bit slower at knife skills, it might take you a little longer. But from start to finish, this sauce that can be used and adapted so many different ways is pretty fast when you think about it. It's bubbling, so I'm gonna turn it down for a second. I do want to give a quick shout out to Isaiah Ramos. He subscribed to my Patreon, and you get a shout out if you do that. So you can get a shout out at the end of my videos, and you can get to direct message me one-on-one, and we can talk about food, your suggestions for upcoming recipe ideas, things like that. That will be in my description box down below, as well as all my social media. If you like stuff like this, please give it a big thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and turn your notification bells on. That way you can get notified when I do post a new video. I tend to post things on Thursdays, once a week. Sometimes I'll drop a surprise video here and there if I have it. Yeah, so let's try the sauce. This is the moment of truth, people. I think tonight I might have, I'm gonna try to do gluten-free as well. I don't know why I'm doing all this at once. I might do some gluten-free pasta. This would be so nice over like a polenta, which is also gluten-free. Ravioli, you know, I don't want to sit here and list pastas to you, but you got the idea. So you can see, I mean, it literally looks like, I'm nervous to try this. When I have ideas in my head, I tend to get really excited about them, and I'm like, it's the execution when it comes down to it for me that I'm like, okay, is it gonna resemble meat sauce? Because this is, you know, this is the final taste test. I mean, I'm double dipping. This is my house, my rules, okay? Don't worry about me. It's really good. Guys, it's really good. I'm gonna let it cook down for a few more minutes, just to let those flavors meld. It's good. When I say that's meat sauce, if you told me it was, the flavors are amazing. I mean, I think that the red wine mixed in with the nuts and the mushrooms really helped. Like I said, you can go a little bit thicker in terms of the mushrooms and nuts. I just wouldn't go too thick because then you're like, I'm eating nuts. I'm gonna let this cook down for 5 to 10 more minutes, and I think it's gonna be perfect. I urge you to try this at home. Again, use ground beef if you want to. I'm not, you know, rewriting. I'm not like, you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If you have a special sauce recipe that you're like, no, I'm not making this. If you want to try something new, try this. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. As always, thanks for watching, and remember, you got this.